There's a man in a jewelry store right now, somewhere in America. He's 27, maybe 28. He's been in the store for 40 minutes. His palms are damp. A salesperson is showing him a round, brilliant cut, 1 carat, set in platinum. The price tag says $9,000. He makes $54,000 a year. He can't really afford it. He knows that. But he's already done the math, the way men have been doing the math for decades. 2 months' salary. That's the rule. That's what you're supposed to spend. He doesn't know where that rule came from. He's never questioned it. It just exists, the way gravity exists, the way you're supposed to hold a door open or say bless you when someone sneezes. He's going to buy it. He's going to put it on a credit card. He's going to carry a balance for months. And when he kneels down and opens that box, the person he loves is going to cry. Because the diamond means something. It means forever. It means commitment. It means he's serious. She knows this. He knows this. Everyone at the dinner table the next week will know this. And none of them will know that every single part of that moment was engineered. Not by tradition, not by history, not by some ancient custom passed down through generations, by a mining company, an advertising agency, and one woman working late at night in Philadelphia in 1947. Her name was Frances Garrity. She was a copywriter at N.W. Ayer and Son, one of the oldest ad agencies in the country. She had been assigned a single client, De Beers, the diamond cartel. She scribbled 4 words on a scrap of paper before going to bed. 4 words that would reshape the economies of entire countries, redefine marriage customs on 3 continents, and create a $1 trillion market for a stone that, if you ever tried to sell it back, would be worth a fraction of what you paid. Remember that name, because when we get to the end, those 4 words are going to land differently than you expect. First, you need to understand the problem those 4 words were designed to solve. And to understand that, you need to go back 100 years, to South Africa, to a teenager named Cecil Rhodes. In 1871, Cecil Rhodes was 18 years old. He'd come to South Africa from England to work on his brother's cotton farm. The farm failed. But nearby, in Kimberley, they'd found diamonds. Rhodes didn't pick up a shovel. He picked up a checkbook. Over the next 17 years, financed by the Rothschild banking family, he bought out every small mining claim in the region, one by one, methodically, until he controlled all of them. In 1888, he merged his holdings with those of rival Barney Bernato and created De Beers Consolidated Mines. By the early 1900s, De Beers controlled roughly 90% of the world's diamond production. 90%. One company, one family's vision. The entire global supply of a gemstone funneled through a single bottleneck. Rhodes died in 1902, but the machine he built didn't die with him. In 1927, a German-born financier named Ernest Oppenheimer took control of De Beers. He looked at what Rhodes had created and saw that controlling the mines wasn't enough. You also had to control the pipeline. Every diamond that came out of the ground, anywhere on Earth, had to flow through one door. In 1930, Oppenheimer created the Central Selling Organization, the CSO. It worked like this. Diamond producers from around the world would sell their rough stones to De Beers. De Beers would stockpile them in vaults in London. Then, every 5 weeks, approved brokers would be invited to a room, handed a box of diamonds, and told the price. There was no haggling. You accepted the box, or you didn't. If you didn't, you might not be invited back. This meant De Beers decided how many diamonds entered the market at any given time. Too many diamonds, and the price drops. Too few, and buyers go elsewhere. The trick was releasing just enough to keep prices high and supply looking scarce. Diamonds aren't actually rare. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates global reserves exceed 1 billion carats, but De Beers made them feel rare by locking most of them in a vault. By the 1930s, the Oppenheimer family had a monopoly on the supply side. What they didn't have was the demand side, and in 1938, that became a serious problem. The Great Depression had gutted diamond sales. Since World War I, sales had dropped to roughly half their pre-war levels, and the Depression pushed them even lower. Diamond engagement rings were a luxury. Most Americans didn't buy them. The custom existed for the wealthy, but for ordinary working people, a diamond ring was extravagant, unnecessary. In 1940, only about 10% of American brides received a diamond engagement ring. De Beers was sitting on mountains of stones that nobody wanted to buy. So in 1938, a representative of Sir Ernest Oppenheimer wrote a letter to an advertising agency in Philadelphia, N.W. Ayer and Son. The letter asked whether the agency could explore, in the representative's words, the use of propaganda in various forms to increase diamond sales in the United States. That word, propaganda, they used it themselves. They weren't hiding what this was. N.W. Ayer said yes. De Beers committed roughly $500,000 a year, about $9.2 million in today's money, for 3 years. The assignment was simple on its face: make Americans buy diamonds. But N.W. Ayer understood that conventional advertising wouldn't work. You couldn't just put a diamond ad in a magazine and expect people to change their behavior. People didn't distrust diamonds, they just didn't think about them. Diamonds weren't part of the culture. They weren't part of the story Americans told themselves about love and commitment. So N.W. Ayer decided to change the story. You know what they did after that? They went to Hollywood. The agency created something called the Hollywood Personalities Service. It fed stories to 125 major newspapers about which diamonds movie stars were wearing, which diamonds they received as engagement gifts, which diamonds appeared on their fingers at premieres and award shows. These weren't ads. They were planted editorial content. A columnist would mention that a certain actress received a stunning diamond from her fiancé, and readers would absorb it not as marketing, but as celebrity news, as aspiration. Simultaneously, N.W. Ayer paid Hollywood studios to write diamond rings into film scripts. The leading man proposes. He opens a box. She sees the diamond. She says yes. This wasn't product placement in the way we think of it today, where a Coca-Cola can appears in a scene. This was deeper. They were writing diamonds into the narrative structure of romance itself. The diamond wasn't a prop. It was a plot point, a turning point, the moment the story changed. They arranged for fashion designers to talk about diamonds in interviews. They organized events where socialites would be photographed wearing diamond engagement rings. They worked with magazines like Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Life, Collier's, and the Saturday Evening Post to run features about diamond trends. They sent diamond rings to the wives of politicians and made sure the press covered it. Newspapers ran items about the engagement diamonds of women ranging from the First Lady to Hollywood starlets. And they knew. They knew they weren't selling a product. They were building an expectation. They were embedding diamonds into the social infrastructure of American courtship so deeply that within a generation, not having a diamond engagement ring would feel like an absence, a gap, something missing. By 1941, 3 years into the campaign, diamond sales in the United States had increased 55%. That was before the slogan. That was just the groundwork, the conditioning, the slow, patient saturation of a culture with a single idea. Diamonds belong in love stories. And then came Frances Gerety. She joined N.W. Ayer in 1943, assigned to the De Beers account. She wrote the ads that ran in those glossy magazines. She crafted the language that turned a compressed carbon crystal into an emotional object. She did this for decades, working under a glass ceiling that kept her contributions largely unrecognized until late in her career. In 1947, late one night at her desk, she scribbled a line on a piece of paper. She brought it into the office the next morning and presented it to her colleagues. They weren't impressed. The line was approved without enthusiasm. A diamond is forever. 4 words. They appeared in their first De Beers ad in 1948. They've appeared in every De Beers engagement ad since. In 1999, Advertising Age named it the greatest advertising slogan of the 20th century. Greater than Nike's Just Do It. Greater than Coca-Cola's The Real Thing. And those 4 words did something far more sophisticated than sell jewelry. They solved De Beers' second biggest problem, the resale market. If people started selling their old diamonds, those stones would re-enter the market, supply would surge, prices would collapse. De Beers controlled the mines, but they couldn't control the estimated 500 million carats of gem diamonds already sitting in people's jewelry boxes. As journalist Edward J. Epstein wrote in his 1982 Atlantic article, That stockpile in private hands was more than 50 times the number of gem diamonds De Beers produced in any given year. A diamond is forever meant, don't sell it. It means your love is eternal, so the diamond must be eternal too. Selling a diamond would be like selling your wedding vows. It would mean the love wasn't real. The slogan didn't just encourage purchase, it killed resale. It made the secondary market socially unacceptable, and that is exactly what De Beers needed to maintain the illusion of scarcity. If you have ever tried to sell a diamond, you already know the punchline. Walk into any jeweler with a ring you paid $5,000 for. They'll offer you $1,500, maybe $2,000 if you're lucky. As soon as you leave the store with a diamond, it's worth 50 to 80% less than what you paid. That's not because the diamond degraded. It's because the retail markup was the product. The diamond was just the delivery system. You know what they did after that? They exported the whole operation. In 1967, De Beers turned its attention to Japan. At that time, less than 5% of Japanese brides received a diamond engagement ring. There was no tradition of it, none at all. Japanese marriages were traditionally arranged by families through intermediaries. The ceremony was consummated under Shinto law by the bride and groom drinking rice wine from the same wooden bowl. No courtship ritual required a diamond. The concept simply did not exist. De Beers hired the J. Walter Thompson Agency to create one from scratch. The strategy was deliberate. The ads showed beautiful women displaying diamond rings. The women had Western facial features. They wore European clothing. They were shown doing things that defied Japanese traditions: bicycling, camping, yachting, mountain climbing. The men beside them wore European suits. The backgrounds featured imported automobiles and sporting equipment. Every visual element communicated the same message. Diamonds represent a break with the past and entry into modern life. They weren't selling a ring, they were selling the West. They were telling young Japanese women that a diamond engagement ring was what modern, liberated, international women received. And they were telling young Japanese men that buying one meant they were worldly and progressive and worthy. By 1981, 14 years after the campaign launched, 60% of Japanese brides were receiving diamond engagement rings, from 5% to 60%, in a country that had zero tradition of giving them, in a single generation. And that's just one country. De Beers ran similar campaigns in Brazil, Germany, and across Asia. Each one adapted to local culture. Each one built the same expectation from nothing. Diamond engagement rings didn't spread because cultures organically decided they were meaningful. They spread because a mining cartel paid advertising agencies to create meaning where none existed. Meanwhile, the price anchoring was getting more aggressive. In the 1930s and 1940s, De Beers suggested that a man should spend 1 month's salary on an engagement ring. By the 1980s, their ads asked a different question. How can you make 2 months' salary last forever? The 2-month salary rule wasn't a tradition. It wasn't a cultural norm that evolved over time. It was a line in an advertisement, written by a copywriter, approved by a client, and repeated until it hardened into something that felt like fact. In the UK, the guideline was 1 month's salary. In Japan, 3 months. De Beers adjusted the number country by country, testing how much they could extract from each market. The guideline existed for one reason: to set a floor on how much men would spend. Without it, men might spend whatever felt right. They might spend $500. They might spend $300. The salary rule eliminated that risk. It turned the purchase into a performance of commitment, measured in currency. Between 1939 and 1979, wholesale diamond sales in the United States went from $23 million to $2.1 billion. De Beers' advertising budget grew from roughly $200,000 to $10 million a year. Every dollar they spent on advertising came back multiplied 100-fold. Because they weren't selling a product, they were selling a social obligation. In 1982, journalist Edward J. Epstein published an article in The Atlantic called "Have You Ever Tried to Sell a Diamond?" It laid the entire system bare. He documented how De Beers had created what he called the diamond invention, the idea that diamonds are rare, that they hold their value, and that they symbolize eternal love. He showed that none of these claims were true. Diamonds are geologically abundant. They lose most of their retail value the moment you leave the store, and the association with love was manufactured in a Philadelphia advertising office in the mid-20th century. Epstein described the London vaults where De Beers stockpiled stones to restrict supply. He described how, in the 1980s, De Beers was buying 2.6 million carats per year from the Soviet Union, roughly a quarter of global production, just to keep those diamonds off the open market. He described the Central Selling Organization's iron control over distribution. He described how the entire edifice depended on one thing: making sure ordinary people never tried to resell their diamonds. Because the moment a functioning secondary market appeared, the price structure would collapse. That article was published in 1982. It's still happening right now. De Beers' market share has declined since its monopoly peak. They no longer control 90% of the rough diamond market. By the early 2000s, their share had dropped to around 40%, partly because of antitrust pressure. In 2004, De Beers pled guilty to criminal price-fixing charges in the United States, paying a $10 million fine after being indicted back in 1994. For a decade, De Beers executives couldn't enter the United States without risking arrest. But the cultural infrastructure they built remains intact. The expectation of a diamond engagement ring is so deeply embedded that even people who know the history still participate. Knowing doesn't help. That's the part nobody tells you. You can read every article, you can watch every documentary, you can understand intellectually that the diamond engagement ring tradition was manufactured by a cartel to sell surplus inventory. And then your partner's sister gets engaged and shows up with a ring, and your partner's eyes move to it, and you see the reaction, and you know. You know that the expectation isn't about De Beers anymore. It's about everyone around you. It's about what your mother-in-law will think. It's about what the photos will look like. It's about the moment someone asks to see the ring, and there either is one or there isn't. The campaign succeeded so completely that it no longer needs to run. The social pressure is self-sustaining. Every woman who receives a diamond ring and shows it to her friends reinforces the expectation for the next woman. Every man who spends 2 months' salary and sees his partner's reaction is living proof to the next man that it works. The advertisement became a tradition. The tradition became a norm. The norm became infrastructure. And infrastructure is invisible. You don't argue with infrastructure. You just live inside it. That was 1947. It's still happening right now. And now something interesting is happening. The system is cracking. Not from awareness. Not from people reading Edward J. Epstein. From technology. Lab-grown diamonds are chemically identical to mined diamonds. Same crystal structure, same hardness, same optical properties. You cannot tell them apart without specialized equipment. The difference is that a lab-grown diamond costs a fraction of what a mined diamond costs, and the gap is widening. Lab-grown diamond prices at wholesale have fallen roughly 90% in recent years, driven by massive production capacity, particularly from Chinese manufacturers. A 2024 survey by The Knot of nearly 17,000 couples who married that year found that 52% of engagement rings featured lab-grown diamonds, more than half, up from 46% in 2023, up from just 12% in 2019. The average cost of a lab-grown diamond engagement ring was $4,900. A mined diamond ring averaged $7,600, and the lab-grown stones were larger. Average center stone of 2.0 carats versus 1.6 for mined. De Beers saw this coming. In 2018, they launched a brand called Lightbox, selling lab-grown diamond jewelry at low prices. The strategy was transparent. If lab-grown diamonds were going to enter the market, De Beers wanted to position them as cheap fashion accessories, fundamentally different from real diamonds. The tagline was designed to reinforce the idea that mined diamonds were the authentic ones. The ones with meaning, the ones that were forever. It didn't work. In May 2025, De Beers announced it was shutting down Lightbox entirely. Lab-grown diamond prices had collapsed so far that Lightbox's own retail prices were higher than wholesale rates for competing products. De Beers couldn't control this market the way it had controlled the mined diamond market for a century. There were no mines to monopolize, no vaults to stockpile in, No central selling organization to regulate distribution. Anyone with the right equipment could grow a diamond in a laboratory. The supply couldn't be choked. For the first time in its history, De Beers faces a competitor it cannot buy, cannot outproduce, and cannot lock in a vault. The same company that spent a century making you believe diamonds were rare is now spending millions trying to convince you that only their kind of diamond is the right kind of diamond. They're running campaigns emphasizing natural origin, geological age, the romance of something formed deep in the earth over billions of years. They're trying to make you feel that a lab-grown diamond isn't real enough, that it doesn't count, that it's a shortcut. They're trying to do exactly what they did in 1938, rewrite the meaning of a stone. But here's what they can't undo. The expectation they built, the diamond engagement ring itself, that expectation doesn't care where the diamond came from. It only cares that there is one. And if a lab-grown diamond is bigger, cheaper, and visually identical, the social expectation is satisfied. The ring goes on the finger. The photo goes on social media. The mother-in-law approves. The infrastructure holds. De Beers built a machine so powerful, it now works against them. Let me take you back to that man in the jewelry store, 27 years old, looking at a 1-carat round brilliant, $9,000, 2 months' salary. He doesn't know about Cecil Rhodes buying up Kimberley Mines in 1871. He doesn't know about Ernest Oppenheimer creating the Central Selling Organization in 1930. He doesn't know about the letter in 1938 that used the word propaganda. He doesn't know that N.W. Ayer planted stories in 125 newspapers and paid Hollywood studios to write diamonds into love scenes. He doesn't know that the 2-month salary rule was written by a copywriter and approved by a client. He doesn't know that if he walks out of the store and tries to sell that ring tomorrow, he'll get back maybe 30 cents on the dollar. He just knows that this is what you do. This is what love looks like. This is the box you open when you kneel down. He knows because his father knew. And his father knew because of a campaign that started in 1938. And that campaign was designed by an advertising agency that was hired by a mining cartel that was controlled by a family that had been manipulating the global diamond supply since the 1920s. And the woman who wrote the words that held the whole thing together? Frances Garrity. She worked on the De Beers account from 1943 until 1970. She wrote the ads that ran in Vogue and Life and the Saturday Evening Post. She crafted the language that turned a mineral into a promise. She created the slogan that advertising age named the greatest of the 20th century. Frances Garrity never married. She lived alone in Wayne, Pennsylvania for most of her life. She died on April 11, 1999, at the age of 83. She never received a diamond engagement ring. The woman who convinced 3 generations of Americans that a diamond meant forever, that love without a diamond was somehow incomplete, that 2 months of a man's labor was the minimum price of commitment. She never had one herself. She didn't need one. She understood, better than anyone, that the diamond's value was in the belief, not the stone. You're wearing one right now, or someone you love is, or you're saving up for one, or you're in debt because of one. They got you. Now you know how.